Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 7, Episode 11, Prodigal Daughter. This episode aired January 6th, 1999.
Yes.
We're going to podcast like it's 1999.
I believe those were the original lyrics for that song.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Well, before we talk about Prodigal Daughter, anything to say about last week's episode, It's Only a Paper Moon?
No, it was perfect.
I think you should leave that really long pause in there. It took you a long time to answer that question. I have to think about it. That was okay.
No, my opinions on that episode actually changed over time.
Yeah, I understand. I did notice on IMDb that episode has a pretty high rating, which I don't agree with. But I have complained before about the IMDb ratings being all over the place. It was fine. It was, we gave it a thumbs up and we moved on.
That is an accurate summary, I think, yes.
All right, well, let's start then on this episode, if you're ready.
The one thing I would like to do is we probably can't because of copyright issues there are points during this episode I would like to use the Law and Order. Dung dung. Because I think it would fit with this episode.
Yeah, I don't think I'll add that in. Somebody would probably sue us. But, you can make the sound. I don't think they'll figure that out. Well, in the cold open, we're in Quarks, and Odo lets Ezri know that the gach Jadzia ordered for Martog's birthday has arrived. There are 51 cases of it, each containing a different variety. And then Ezri starts listing off all the different varieties and making herself quite nauseous.
I liked the breakdown of different gachs. I thought that was very good.
One had legs,
yes.
One wiggles or something while it goes down. Yeah.
Bethul gach has feet. I like that.
Ugh. Meanwhile, Julian is sitting there, clearly distracted by something and not participating in the conversation.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make more sense that Jadzia's order would have been delivered to Worf, not to Ezri?
That's a good point because business transactions, debts, loans, and everything all end with the other person.
Exactly.
So Ezri shouldn't be on the hook because of stuff Jadzia did. So Worf is the next of kin. There you go. Exactly.
And even if they don't do that, she could still just give it to Worf.
Yeah.
And he could give it to Martog. But anyway.
There's ways around this.
Yeah.
There's an even simpler way. Give it to Sisko, who will give it to Martog and help strengthen that bond between humans, the Federation, and the Klingons.
Yeah. It just seems like this shouldn't be Ezri's problem.
Yeah.
Well, Ezri makes herself so nauseous talking about gach that she has to leave the table, and Bashir also excuses himself to meet the transport that Miles is supposed to be on. But when Julian gets to the airlock, he sees Miles is not on board, and he looks very concerned.
Yeah, who's going to play his juvenile games with him?
Yes. And now Julian goes to Sisko's office to tell him Miles isn't really visiting his family on Earth. Instead, he's gone to New Sydney to search for Bilby's wife. Remember Bilby, that's the guy that Miles got too attached to in the Donnie Brasco episode last season. But now Julian hasn't heard from Miles for a few days, so he's worried. Sisko is understandably quite annoyed. Julian tries to defend him, saying, Miles tried to go through official channels, but the authorities on New Sydney were not helpful, and it's not in the Federation, so he couldn't get help there.
Yeah.
Sisko tells Julian he wants a written report about everything he knows about the situation, and he stomps out of his office.
Yeah, Sisko here points out that he's not a detective. He's my chief engineer.
Yeah.
He was also not an undercover Starfleet intelligence operative, but you made him do that.
Yeah, and I kept thinking in this episode that they shouldn't be upset by how Miles reacts to this whole thing because he was thrown into an undercover operation without being part of Starfleet intelligence, without having any particular kind of training. So he wasn't really prepared for any emotional impact.
Right.
So they shouldn't be surprised that he does something they don't like.
Yeah. It might have been like the Ezri thing. They gave us some pamphlets and said, how to be an undercover operative.
No, read this Wikipedia page on going undercover. At the end, it says you go home and everything's fine.
I can understand Sisko's frustration with Miles doing this and not being upfront about it.
And not telling him, yeah.
I would wonder if Sisko would actually let him do it. If he told him, look, I really need to go and find what happened here. I feel responsible. I have the feeling Sisko would say to him, no, do not.
Yeah. Sisko might remind him that he has 2 kids and a wife.
Right.
Yeah. And that maybe he could hire a detective, or maybe he could have talked to Odo about it, and Odo could have reached out to some of his contacts.
Yes.
There's more that he could have done. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Sisko could have used some of his leverage. He could have brought Odo in, and it could have been significantly easier. But I guess none of that gets to the heart of it, which is Miles feels responsible.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
I guess so. Well, Sisko goes to see Ezri because Ezri's family home is in the same system as New Sydney. Turns out, Ezri's mother owns the 6th largest per GM mining facility in that sector.
Oh.
Not a penguin mining facility like my iPad has autocorrected this to.
Penguin mining, it's big in the 23rd century. I wondered where penguins came from.
When I was going through my notes, I was like, oh, that's amazing. For a minute, I thought I'd just say penguin mining and not fix it, but we'd probably get letters.
So, Ezri comes from money. Old money.
Coal money. That's what it seemed like.
Oh, that's true.
Sisko asks if her mother would be willing to intervene with local authorities to get them to help find Miles. Ezri thinks she would help, but she hasn't spoken to her mother since just after she was joined 6 months ago. She was still trying to adjust to being joined, and they had a big argument.
Yeah.
She says she'll call her mom right away, but she's definitely a bit uneasy about having to do that.
Yeah, after the joining, she introduced herself to her own mother as, "Hi, I'm Curzon."
It's me, Curzon. Do you got any booze in the house?
Can I interest you in this get-rich-quick scheme?
Oh, no.
There's some guys I owe money to.
Well, now Ezri is talking to her mom on FaceTime. It starts off pleasant enough, but her mom is a bit frosty, especially when she learns Ezri no longer uses the family name of Tegan and now goes by Ezri Dax. But honestly, this seems like something she should have expected. I mean, the woman is a Trill.
Yeah, and it's part of your culture and society. And as an unjoined Trill, your life is really just disposable to make sure that the symbionts are happy.
Well,
sorry, the parasites.
Well, maybe her mother isn't into that whole thing. You know what I mean? Because she's built her life off-world. She's built this whole empire of something. Maybe she's anti-Trill. I mean, they don't say that. They could have. That might have been a way to give this character some layers.
Gosh, that would have been really good if the mother was part of a Trill sect or a Trill...
like really against it.
Yes, that they saw the symbionts as parasites, and having your daughter do this would be a real wedge in the family.
Gosh, I didn't think about that until just now. That would have probably fixed a lot of problems with this episode. But anyway, here we are. Ezri tells her about Miles, and her mother agrees to help, but she uses it to blackmail Ezri into coming home for a visit. She says she won't help unless she returns home immediately, and then she hangs up. So she's a barrel of fun.
Yep.
And we cue the theme song.
I did like here how, even though it's going to be personally very uncomfortable for Ezri, she agreed to do this, to find Miles, to help Sisko. I think it speaks to the character of Ezri. We've already seen that she was prepared to become a joined Trill to save Dax and put her neck out. And again, this is another thing, I think it speaks to the character of Ezri, that I'm going to be in a really uncomfortable situation. This isn't going to be great, but I'm going to do it anyway because it needs to be done. I like that a lot.
She should be getting more comfortable with doing uncomfortable things by now.
Yeah.
Well, on the way to the transport, Bashir gives Ezri a hypo spray for dealing with space sickness. They commiserate a bit about having unpleasant parents. And then Ezri heads into the airlock.
I think from very different perspectives, but it's definitely something that he could relate to Ezri with.
Yeah. Well, now we go to a very smoggy mining facility with a fancy house overlooking it.
I thought that was actually New Sydney.
Okay. It didn't say on the screen.
I thought that planet was New Sydney.
It was so confusing because they talked early on about the system being the Sapara system and Ezri's family being from that system, but they didn't actually say she was from New Sydney. But yes, I think it was New Sydney.
Yeah, and that place looks like a dump.
No, it looks bad, yeah. It looks like a very industrialized area that you didn't even see any other houses. You just saw their one big house on the top of the mining facility.
Oh, yeah. Their big fancy house on top of the hill overlooking basically the dump.
Yeah, but...
I don't want to rain on their wonderful architecture, but overlooking a dump still means you're overlooking a dump, even if the house is nice.
And I was also thinking, what we learn here is that they're all in the mines. It's not like they're digging with a pickaxe or anything, but they're all part of this world. And you must think, if you have money, why? I mean, sell it and go somewhere nice where there's actually air you can breathe and sights you can see out of your windows, because there's a million windows on this house, but there's nothing to see.
Yeah. And when you're up that high, you would think all the smog would raise up.
It would go right into your vents. Yeah. Or maybe raise your house up even higher.
Oh, above the cloud line. Oh,
yeah.
They're really rich. The people who really run everything are actually Cloud City. They're floating above the cloud level.
What was that movie? Elysium? The rich people lived way up in the clouds?
The rich people actually lived outside the atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, do that. Inside the house, Ezri enters and takes note of a painting hanging on the wall when Norvo, one of her brothers, welcomes her. The brother says, "You cut your hair," and it takes some getting used to. This is sounding a lot like an experience I had when I cut my hair after college, which we'll talk about in a minute. This actor playing Norvo, his name is Kevin Rom, and he's been in a ton of things. I remember him specifically from being on Friends in like one episode, also on Desperate Housewives, but he has a very innocent, youthful face, sort of like the woman who plays Ezri, so I thought they made good siblings.
Yes, this is a great example of good casting.
Yeah, I agree. Norvo and Ezri talk about the giant painting on the wall, which Norvo painted and he hates, but Mother insists on displaying it. Then Janelle, the other brother, arrives, and he is definitely the frostier brother, a lot more like Mom.
And he's been working in the mines as well.
Yeah, except he's completely clean. He also picks on Ezri's hair, like this is a theme.
Yeah.
And Janelle says they haven't found Miles yet, but they have some leads. And continuing his frosty attitude, he says he hopes Ezri appreciates all the trouble Mother had to go through to help her. She called in a lot of favors from the New Sydney police.
She's rich. She just calls up the DA and says, I'm not going to contribute to your campaign.
Yeah, she made a phone call. Well, then in comes Mother, and her very first line is, "I hate your hair." Why are these people like this?
Such a great family dynamic here.
No wonder Ezri doesn't go home. She's like, "Ay, you people."
Yeah.
But this is not... I think we've talked about this before on this podcast, but after college, I chopped all my hair off and didn't tell my mother. And when I went home, the first thing she said to me was, "Oh, you cut your hair?" And I was like, "And?" And she said, "It has a certain style."
We still use that joke about things today.
I mean, it was quite upsetting in the moment. She still denies that it ever happened. She just puts it out of her mind. And she's like, "Nah, I never said that."
Compartmentalized, never happened.
She said that. Though, I mean, it stung so much. I remember the exact thing. So when the mother came in and said that, I laughed because I was like, oh man, that's, yeah. I feel that one, Ezri.
The thing that makes me laugh about this, watching it now, is Futurama. Ezri's mother totally reminds me of the character of Mom.
Okay.
And the two idiot brothers, Mom has I think they're clones, 3 sons who are basically like the Three Stooges. Being reintroduced to these two, I'm like, oh wow, it so reminds me of Futurama.
That's funny. I don't remember that. I mean, I watched Futurama, but I don't remember that. I think maybe I stopped watching it for a while. I saw the end. Anyway, Mother issues some orders to each of the brothers with a few insults at Norvo for being slow at the bookkeeping.
Oh dear.
Your artist is slow at bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Excellent use of resources there.
Then she ushers Ezri out of the room to show her something in the house. And when they're alone, Janelle tells Norvo that he has to fire an employee because there's a broken piece of equipment that Mother is blaming on sloppy maintenance. Janelle tends to agree with her, but he thinks the Orion Syndicate is behind it. He says, they don't take no for an answer. Norvo wants to tell Mother, but Janelle tells him to relax. He says, I'll take care of it.
Oh, yeah.
So we got some trouble brewing.
Yes.
Later at dinner, Ezri is telling everyone about the other people she's met on the station and how they're all adjusting to a new Dax. Norvo starts to ask a question, but Mother interrupts him and cuts him off quite rudely. Ezri later makes a joke about waking up and not knowing if she's a man or a woman until she pulls back the covers. And for some reason, this makes everybody very uncomfortable. I thought that was a pretty cute anecdote. I mean, these people, they have no sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. I like that sort of Dax talking about this again because it comes down to that. how much of this is Dax and how much is training? How much is they prepare the hosts for what it's going to be like? And Ezri has sort of jumped in with both feet.
Yeah.
And now this whole thing is just this wild learning experience.
Yeah. Every minute is a new experience.
Right. I think it seems to make Ezri an interesting character because of her ability to use the skills that she has built up from these memories. And I also like her sort of confusion with exactly what she is and the personalities that are also, rattling around inside her head. I think I've always really sort of enjoyed that with the character. If it makes the character have sort of depth, even though she's been in very few episodes.
It's so interesting to me to listen to you talk about Ezri. I mean, obviously, I've only, known her from these episodes, and I've seen images of her before, but I didn't know the character at all. And the reason I find it interesting is that I've seen lots of people online complain that they hated this character, couldn't relate to her, whatever, didn't like her. And even some of the emails we've gotten lately, a few people have mentioned, at the time, I really didn't like this character, but watching it now with different eyes is interesting. But I love the way that you see her and the way that you kind of see her depths and you understand what the point of this character is. And you're finding her so fascinating. I hope that that's helping the listeners who didn't know what to make of Ezri in the beginning or didn't like her back in the 90s. I hope that they're able to sort of hear through you that there is something here. Maybe you closed the door to her because of what happened to Terry Farrell and to Jadzia, which I probably would have done too if I'd been watching it. I don't think I would have hated this character because of that, but I doubt I would have watched season 7 because I would have been so mad that they had killed her.
Yes.
But I think maybe there's a lot of that mixed in, that they're just resentful that she's not Jadzia.
Right. I would agree that I was much more willing to accept a new character on the show.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, this is quite an unpleasant dinner, though Mother does say something almost supportive when she says she isn't surprised that Ezri is struggling with the symbiont without having had any training. But then it goes back to ridiculous when she says, well, the family will help her now, so she doesn't need to worry anymore. So you can move back here and everything will be fine.
The family dynamic here is...
It's uncomfortable.
That's a good word for it, yes.
Ezri says she's got things under control, but of course Mother just dismisses that.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Later, Ezri goes to visit Norvo in his room, which is a huge mess. He's got paintings strewn about the room, and he tells her he has no talent because he was rejected by the Andorian Academy. She says there are other art schools you could go to, but he's pretty down on himself, saying he's not good enough.
Oh, dear.
He says all of his artistic hobbies are causing him to not be able to concentrate. He says he doesn't have the discipline it takes to succeed. Ezri immediately recognizes those criticisms as coming directly from Mother.
Yeah.
Ezri says, Mother said the same things about me growing up, and she wasn't right about me, and she's not right about you.
She just wanted the kids to do better.
Ugh. Ezri still believes in him, which doesn't seem to make him feel much better, but she heads out to go to bed, and he keeps on drinking by himself.
Question here.
Yeah.
Did the mother arrange for him to be rejected from the Andorian Academy?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I suppose she could have. I was thinking that maybe no, he really did get rejected, but the mother then used that as ammunition to convince him that he was terrible, when really he could have applied to the second best art school and probably gotten in.
Right.
But he went right for the best, which maybe the mother was like, that's the only one that would matter. And knowing maybe that he wouldn't get in. I don't know, but she could have done that. I have a lot of overanalysis about this, about they didn't really show how awful the mother was in many ways. I mean, she was just sort of unpleasant. But that, again, that would have been a good thing for them to show us, to show how terrible she was.
Well, I think there was a lot of subtext you were supposed to be picking up with the mother, rather than... If they'd had more time, I could see them expanding the way she's controlling them and behaving towards her children and the expectations. So they shorthanded a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, there's too much subtext because it doesn't... I didn't see a lot of it. I didn't really believe it. Maybe it was the performance, but I don't think her dialogue gave us enough about who she really is. Because she would go from saying something sort of nice to saying something sort of not nice.
Yeah.
One time she interrupted Norvo at dinner, but it just didn't seem like it was as harsh as they wanted us to believe. They could have shown it more.
Maybe the person who overanalyzes and generates whole streams of headcanon shouldn't be the one talking about subtext.
Yeah. You make up whole universes in your head about things. Like, remember that episode with the alien? It was Odo's girlfriend. You made up like a whole world of those aliens that we never even saw.
Their law enforcement was almost religious in how they followed it.
That's right. Yeah, you're very good at that. I like stuff. I mean, I can do that too, but I also like them to show me what they're thinking a little bit.
Looping back to the point, I think you're probably right. The mother didn't arrange for him to be rejected, but there's this expectation in the family, maybe that, you have to be in the top school. Everything has to be the premier. And if you don't, you're a failure.
Yeah. And she also was probably not giving him enough space to practice. And maybe he didn't even have any sort of private lessons or, did he even finish school? I don't know. If she was really controlling him and she's trying to get him to do the book work, I mean, it's not surprising.
It's the prodigies and the exceptions that have the natural talent.
Yeah.
It's the other people who can work up to it and still be great.
Right. In the morning, Mother is telling Ezri that it's all her fault that Norvo has a hangover. And then she shows her the painting from the wall that Norvo has defaced. Ezri tries to stand up for him, telling Mother that he's not happy here. But Mother disagrees. She calls Norvo fragile, but Ezri says she's smothering him.
Yes.
So this is a fun argument.
Right.
When Mother says something about her not understanding child rearing, Ezri points out she now has lots of memories of having children.
Yeah, she actually says, I have 4 lifetimes worth of memories of raising children.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to point out that Jadzia in the past said how she'd been a mother and a father and been bad at both. So,
Yes, but she does have experience. Doesn't mean she's good at it.
That's true. Maybe if Ezri in the future chooses to be a parent, that she could use the past negative experiences to know what not to do.
She has examples from her own family about what not to do, and then she's also got these histories that she now remembers. I learned a lot about leadership and management from the worst managers I ever had. Because you learn things not to do, for sure.
Yeah.
I learned the most from the good ones, but you do learn from bad situations.
Mistakes are a way to learn, yes.
For sure. Before this turns into too much of a fight, the New Sydney police come in with a beaten-up Miles. Turns out most of the bruises on Miles came courtesy of the Orion Syndicate, but at least one came from the police officer. I like their little exchange there.
Yeah, he seemed quite proud of knocking Miles on the chin.
Yeah. Ezri asks about Bilby's wife, and Miles says she's dead. After the commercial, everyone is sipping coffee. Turns out Bilby's wife had been dead for 6 weeks, and Miles is sure it was the Orion Syndicate. The police officer says it was an accident, but Miles is like, she accidentally hit herself in the head and accidentally threw herself into the river. The police officer's kind of like, yeah. And he said they'd already heard about a Starfleet intelligence officer trying to infiltrate the Syndicate, which seems ridiculously dangerous. And by the way, he's not Starfleet intelligence.
Yeah.
Miles was found being beaten up by some Nausicaans trying to keep him quiet.
Those Nausicaans are just a problem everywhere they turn up.
Yeah, and it seems like they would have just killed him, not tried to scare him, like he says here, but okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately that would have been their goal, but I think I would see the Nausicaans as liking to take their time. They like violence.
Like when they were throwing darts at each other's heads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of our favorite Nausicaan moments.
Yeah, somebody said, have you ever played any Nausicaan games? They're always painful.
Yeah, like Klingon bachelor parties. The cop says the Syndicate wouldn't have killed Bilby's wife because the only thing holding it together is the loyalty they show the operatives and the families.
Yeah.
Miles makes a snide comment and the police officer leaves in a snit. And then Mother tells Ezri to show Miles to a guest room.
I think the most disturbing thing there was when the police officer said, yeah, we get like 12 bodies a week in the... Yeah, they're all accidents. And you don't see this as a problem?
Meh. They clearly let the Syndicate just clean up after themselves.
Yeah. Also, I think there may be a reference here to maybe this place is an absolute environmental disaster overrun with pollutants, because Miles says the organic solvents in the water. So I'm just picturing this place just being a disaster. They just dump chemicals in the rivers, pollution everywhere.
Well, it looked bad when we first got there.
Miles's makeup here was really good. Where he's got the bruises.
Yeah, it looked real. Later, after Miles has treated all of his bruises and changed clothes, he's having some lunch with Ezri. Mother comes in and asks if he could help with a problem they're having with a transonic drill. Miles says he'd be happy to get his hands on a problem he can help with, and he follows Janelle out. In Norvo's room, he has destroyed everything and ripped up his own paintings. Ezri finds him just waking up from a night of drinking. She wants to talk about his destruction of his paintings, and she asks what he's feeling. He says he's feeling like he doesn't want to be analyzed by his sister.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good-natured chat. He's not super defensive about it. He does say this isn't that complex. I'm wallowing in self-pity and acting out my frustrations by throwing tantrums, which sounds like Mother talking again.
Yeah, it sounds like he's quoting exactly what his mother would say to him.
For sure. Well, then he makes a joke about suicide, which Ezri doesn't like.
Yeah.
And then she suggests he return to DS9 with her.
Yeah.
He, of course, says he can't abandon Mother. She's like, just do it temporarily, like a vacation. Clear your head. He says it's more complicated than she knows, and he has to stay and help with the business. And Ezri points out, Mother could just hire a professional accountant.
Wow.
And she tells him to at least think about it.
There's a thought. Bring in professionals. Is this what psychologists call a toxic relationship?
I don't know if toxic relationship is the right word, but the parent is definitely not letting the child be their own person. I mean, that's certainly happening. I don't know what the psychological term for it is. Maybe the toxic environment is making them all, I don't know, it's stunting all of them.
It's all the result of environmental pollution.
Yeah. It's funny how he says in this conversation, early on, he says, this isn't that complicated. And then at the end, he's like, oh, this is very complicated.
Yes.
It's like, okay.
Oh, dear.
Now we go down to the mines where Miles has found the problem with the drill. There is a mislabeled part. Miles suggests that it was an accident, but Janelle says maybe it was deliberate, just as a very creepy guy in a hard hat slithers into the room and sarcastically asks if he's had another equipment failure.
Mr. Villain, I believe is his name.
Yeah.
He should actually be twirling his moustache as he's talking.
Yeah. This guy he's vaguely threatening, and he's definitely the villain. And he's heard of Miles. This slimy dude, he says his name is Thadiel Bokar, a commodities broker trying to establish business ties with the Tegan family, which is Ezri's family.
Yep.
Janelle thanks Miles and asks him to leave them alone as he has business to discuss with Bokar, so Miles leaves. Janelle tells Bokar that sabotaging his drills isn't going to convince him to do more business with the Orion Syndicate. Bokar says Miles is with Starfleet Intelligence, and Janelle says, no, he isn't. He's just here looking for some woman. And Bokar says, yeah. The woman's name was Morica Bilby, which gets Janelle's attention, which we don't know why yet.
Yep.
Bokar says he heard Morica is dead, but he doesn't know anything about that. What he does know is that O'Brien needs to get out of here quickly before something happens to him. Back to the house, and Janelle asks Miles when he's leaving. And Miles says it's really up to Ezri because she's the superior officer. Janelle basically tells him to get a move on, which makes Miles a little suspicious.
Right.
But Ezri comes in and brushes that off, saying Janelle's just under a lot of pressure. He asks Ezri if she knows this Bokar guy, but Ezri pays no attention to the family business, so she doesn't know who that is.
Yeah, she says she keeps as much distance as she can from it.
Yeah. Miles says that Bokar really reminded him of his time undercover in the Syndicate.
Yeah.
Which, yes, Miles, of course you did, because this guy looks exactly like the guy Ramus in that episode, Donnie Brasco.
Yeah, it's part of the Orion Syndicate training course.
They could be twins.
They have to behave in this manner. It's part of their standard training.
In fact, I went and looked it up. I'm like, they weren't the same person, were they? But no, they were different actors. But I mean, they certainly acted the same and looked the same.
That would have been really funny if they'd done that.
It would have made me laugh, yeah.
It is interesting. Miles has got it all figured out.
Of course, Miles comes into this thinking of nothing but the Orion Syndicate at this point, so he's going to see them everywhere.
Okay, that's a good point.
He happens to be right here, but...
He's seeing them in every shadow. That's a good take, yeah.
Ezri is surprised by what Miles is saying and thinks that they should tell Janelle that Bokar might be in the Syndicate. But Miles is pretty sure that Janelle already knows.
Yeah.
He says Janelle seems like he's been pressured by the Syndicate. Sudden equipment breakdowns, work stoppages, mysterious accidents... He says that's the way the Syndicate extorts money from legitimate companies. Do business with us or we'll ruin you. Ezri thinks Janelle isn't easily intimidated, and she's pretty sure her mother would burn the place to the ground before getting involved with the Syndicate.
Not to criticize Ezri here, but how exactly would she know that if she has as little to do with the business as possible?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's heard something from her mother. I'm not sure, but it's a good question. Miles asks her if she's got access to the financial records, thinking maybe he can find some info on what's going on. Back down in the mines, and Norvo is asking Mother if he can take a vacation on Deep Space Nine, but she is just busy berating him and tells him to get to work on those books.
Yeah, and basically saying, what would you do?
Yeah, he's like, clear my head. And she's thinking, there's nothing in your head. What are you going to clear? Yeah, she's not nice. Up in the main house, Ezri and Miles are going through the business's records when Miles gets suddenly upset by a bunch of green dots on the screen. He asks if Ezri came here to find him or to prevent him from finding out the truth.
Yes.
Ezri has no idea what he's talking about. He's found a connection between the syndicate and her family. Morica Bilby was on the company's payroll when she died.
Oh. I really like that. The way Miles reacts, you can really see it working because he doesn't have that background with Ezri. He doesn't know if he can trust her. And then being confronted with this, yeah, it makes sense. Like you said, he's seeing the Orion Syndicate in every shadow.
Yeah.
And now he's here with someone he doesn't really trust.
Yeah.
And boom, their family is in league with them, or appears to be. I thought that worked.
Ezri knew nothing about it, but Miles points out that someone in the family knows. He says, someone in your family may have been involved in her death, and we have big drama into the ad break.
Yeah, that's where you could have the dung-dung.
Oh, you could definitely have that there.
Yeah.
Turns out Morica showed up on the payroll 6 months ago as a shipping consultant. There's no detail of the work she was doing, but she was being paid higher and higher salaries. Miles asks who's in charge of the payroll, and Ezri says, well, it could have been any of them, or it could be all of them. Miles wants to show it to the authorities, but Ezri says not until she finds out what's going on, and she gives Miles a direct order to wait.
I think that might fall under the illegal order category of...
Yeah, probably.
Deliberately covering up a crime. I think you can refuse an illegal order.
Yeah, but she does say not yet.
Yeah.
And you at least got to give her a little space to see if she can figure out what's going to happen. And they're not in Federation space or, on a Federation planet. And Miles has certainly bent a few rules here and there, so hopefully what he's thinking is, okay, I'm going to give you 24 hours or something like that.
You got 24 hours, kid. You better come through.
Exactly.
Isn't that what they would say in a detective drama?
Sure. Now we're having a family meeting, and Mother is asking Janelle about this Morica Bilby. He says it was a favor for the Orion Syndicate in return for a loan from the Syndicate.
The big reveal. The Syndicate basically bailed them out when they were up to their neck in debt and didn't have any money.
Exactly. He says he did what he had to do, and he points out that Mother didn't ask any questions when their cash problems were fixed overnight.
Very convenient.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, well, I trusted you. Yeah. About a month after taking the loan, Bokar told Janelle it was time for him to do a favor for the Syndicate. They told him there was a widow of one of their associates who they needed to take care of, so they asked Janelle to give her a job but no responsibilities. Yep. So basically just pay her off.
Yeah.
He wasn't in a position to say no, so he started paying her, and he says if Norvo had just altered the payroll records like he asked him to, no one would have found out about it. This really doesn't make Mother happy.
So it's all Norvo's fault.
Yeah.
He couldn't even carry out some corrupt mob activity without screwing it up.
That's right. Janelle points out that Mother has always said there's nothing more important than the company. Ezri stops the bickering and asks why there was an increase in her salary, and Janelle says that's because Morica insisted that the Syndicate had promised her a comfortable living, and she wasn't happy with the amount he was giving her.
Wow, gift horse in the mouth, anyone?
Yeah, so Ezri asked how she died, and Janelle says he doesn't know. Mother starts pushing on Janelle to speak up about what happened to her, but Norvo pipes in that Janelle wouldn't have killed her. Mother tells Janelle that she'll get him the best solicitor, but he has to admit it. She does not believe it's a coincidence the woman died at the exact moment she was pressuring Janelle for more money.
Yeah.
But Norvo says you should listen to him. He didn't do it. This gets Ezri's attention, and she asks Norvo if he knows what happened.
This piece was really well done because you can hear the argument going on in the background between the mother and Janelle while Dax is just concentrating on Norvo.
Yep. And Norvo just smiles weakly and says, I'm the idiot brother. How would I know? But Ezri continues to push on him until he finally says he tried to reason with her, but she was very angry. He says he didn't go there to kill her, but she wouldn't listen. She said our family was just as bad as the Syndicate, and Norvo says suddenly he realized if she were dead, all of their problems would go away. Well, Mother starts to cry and says, oh, Norvo. And Norvo says, I took care of it, Mother. You always said I was too weak, but I'm not. And he says he proved he's not weak by handling a problem that Mother couldn't. And everyone cries.
I think they would probably pat him on the back and say, good job.
Yeah, except now that Ezri knows about it, they're in trouble. And Miles.
Oh, what can Ezri do? It's not a Federation planet. They're Federation citizens. They're wealthy, upstanding members of the community on this world.
Yeah.
And there's no direct physical evidence.
I'm pretty sure if Mother had found out about it without Ezri being there, that's what would have happened. They would have been like, yeah, let's just sweep that under the rug.
She hit herself on the head and fell in the river.
I mean, the police believe that.
A lot of those happening this time of year.
Yeah.
It sounds like the planet is basically mob run, so...
Yes. Later, we see the police ushering a handcuffed Norvo out. Janelle excuses himself to get back to work, but Ezri tells him to stop worrying about the mine. She says, after Norvo's trial, you should get out of here and make a new life for yourself. Then Ezri goes in to see Mother, who is just crying, and Ezri says she'll stay on New Sydney for the trial, but she's going back to the station after. And Mother asks if this is her fault. And Ezri doesn't answer. She just leaves.
I think everybody knows it's the mother's fault.
Well, that's what they want us to think. But geez, the guy's an adult. You know how I feel about people who continue to blame their parents for things when they're adults.
Yeah, I would make an exception here because she's basically controlling his life. And second-guessing all his decisions and...
But I get it when it's about money, but...
Maybe there is a money aspect to this thing.
I guess there is a money aspect because this is about money and this...
They're enjoying their privileged lifestyle.
All right. Okay.
Perched high above the dump.
I'm just hesitant to... Not because I don't think it could have been her fault, but because I just don't think this character was written well enough.
Yeah.
Well, back on the station now, and Miles sees that Ezri has returned and joins her in Quark's. Or I don't know, maybe she's in the Replimat. I wasn't sure, but the twisty stairs were behind her, so I think it was Quark's. Norvo was sentenced to 30 years. Miles says, considering what he did, he got off easy. Ezri understands why he feels that way, but Norvo was gifted and had potential to be something special.
What she didn't mention was because the family was rich, that was a suspended sentence.
Oh, yeah, he's really at home.
Yeah.
She doesn't know how Norvo turned into a murderer, but she's definitely blaming herself a bit for not seeing what was happening to him. The endless humiliation and constant drumbeat of criticism. Miles says she's not responsible, but Ezri disagrees. She says she could have gone home a long time ago, and then she gets up and leaves the table.
Oh.
The end.
Poor Ezri, blaming herself for that. You can see how she could come to that conclusion, because she was the one who got out. But at the same time, the other two could have got out.
They could have. I mean... That's part of my thing, is that they're adults too and they could have left. I also really do understand this thing of, someone who does get out of an abusive home and then when they go back, they feel bad about what happened to their siblings. And a lot of times their siblings don't forgive them. And it's a whole thing. I've certainly known people who've been in those sort of family dynamics.
Yeah.
But again, I sort of struggled with this because it just didn't. Yes, the mother was sort of nasty, but...
And controlling.
She wasn't even nasty. She was just unpleasant.
Yeah.
I just feel like, why couldn't he have left? I don't know.
You're right. They didn't fill that in enough.
Yeah. It's not that I don't believe that would happen.
Yeah.
I just don't think this character, we didn't show her as tough enough to convince me that that's what was going on.
I take your point.
Well, do you have overanalysis?
Yes, I have a few overanalysis points.
Okay.
First one. So what happened to Bilby's kids? He had 2 children. Are they in the river too?
Well... We certainly didn't talk about it. I'm guessing no, because they made it clear that this was not the Orion Syndicate, so the Nausicaans were not sent to kill them. And Norvo is the one who killed the mother, and she was probably just, trying to get money for her and her kids. So who knows? Although I think it's possible that Morica Bilby was quite greedy and was just out for herself, and maybe she'd already pawned the kids off to a relative.
Oh, ooh, that's a harsh take, yeah.
There's some headcanon. Or the kids were already joining the syndicate.
Following in their father's footsteps.
I don't know how old they were. They were pretty young in the picture, right?
I thought so, yeah.
In the episode, yeah. Hopefully somebody's looking after them.
Next thing. Do you think the mother had any inkling of what Norvo was up to? Because she said about how he was delicate and needed to be protected, and then objected to him leaving the planet to go to Deep Space Nine with Ezri. Do you think she had some inkling that he had killed this woman?
No, I don't think so. I think she had convinced herself that he was delicate. And I'm guessing it's because he wasn't Janelle. He wasn't ready to jump into the mines and maybe do the physical labor because he was an artist. It sounded like he was maybe also a writer or something, or he was some kind of a creator. He was a very creative person and it called it his creative hobbies. So My guess is she just looked down on him because he wasn't as tough, physically tough, as the brother, and he wasn't stepping up in the same way, and he probably just seemed a bit whiny to her. And so in her mind, he needed her to straighten him out.
Yeah.
So yes, he should have run away a long time ago.
Oh, absolutely. Next thing. Wouldn't the Orion Syndicate be a little bit upset if one of their people or one of their families of their associates got killed? Wouldn't they be very upset at Norvo?
Yeah, I don't think this helps anything between the Orion Syndicate and the Tegan family.
Yeah, they killed one of their shadows on the payroll.
Yeah, because they told Janelle to take care of her financially, and the brother killed her. Well, yeah, I assume they didn't appreciate it, and they probably continued to apply pressure to Janelle and the family. But also, I mean, Norvo went to jail, so...
Well, the other side of it is I wonder if this causes a little bit too much exposure for the Syndicate. So it's kind of like, cut your losses, back off. It's better not to get caught or have anybody dig into your dealings than have to punish the family kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I think my final point, the Orion Syndicate seems to be very out in the open on this world.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you, from the Federation standpoint, be embargoing this world, seeing as they're actually helping your enemy? The Orion Syndicate was openly helping the Dominion. How about a blockade? How about some kind of sanctions?
From the Federation, you're saying?
Yeah, from the Federation side. I mean, it's outside Federation world, but you've got somebody who's actively helping your enemy. Do you just stand by and go, hey, it's fair game?
Well, we didn't talk about that. I mean, maybe those embargoes are in place. Maybe maybe that is going on.
They can't sell to the Federation.
Maybe. But at the same time, the Federation is quite busy fighting the Dominion.
I think you'd want to go after any resources the Dominion was leveraging.
You would.
Maybe Section 31 actually likes this because it allows them to more easily penetrate the Syndicate if they're so open about it.
Yeah, good point.
They're pretty sneaky.
Yeah, they wear leather.
Oh, exactly. So I think that really wraps up my overanalysis. There's not a lot of depth, not a lot of overanalysis. So over to you, Cam.
Well, I have a couple of points in overanalysis, but the first one is one that I've mentioned already a couple of times, which is I could see what they were trying to do with the story, but they just didn't do it very well.
Yeah.
It's like they wanted to make it a complex psychological story about how the young, artistic, sensitive brother was so smothered by his mother that he snapped. But the mother was, to me, just kind of unpleasant. You didn't really see the smothering and the controlling. You know, she wasn't really forceful and didn't seem like Norvo couldn't just say, oh, screw you, and just leave, right? We just didn't see any real reason for that. So to me, the character of Janelle made a lot more sense than Norvo, but that's just sort of the way the story is.
Yeah.
Also, I was surprised to learn that, or at least it seemed like, Ezri wasn't even talking to her brother. Like, they weren't even having FaceTime calls or anything. They seemed pretty close. Are we supposed to believe that she actually just cut him off completely when she left home? And this would have been before she was joined, even.
Right.
So that's surprising to me that she would have done that, because she seems like quite a sensitive person.
It seems like that does seem to be the case. She gives this impression of she's really not had any contact with any of them.
Yeah, you'd think she would talk to the brother.
Yeah.
But maybe she didn't want to call because every time she called, he was like, oh, why didn't you come home? I don't know.
I think that maybe leads into why she was feeling guilty at the end.
I guess so, yeah.
Because she did cut them off, because this environment was so toxic for her.
Yeah.
She didn't want anything to do with it, and she kind of left Norvo to his own devices, which certainly didn't work out well for him.
You know, I wonder if what's bothering me is it was so silly how they were all saying they didn't like her hair or her hair was bad or whatever. And I wonder if I'm conflating that with my own experience and my own mother, you know, just sort of picking on my hair. And to me, that was just a harmless, ridiculous comment that came from her. And, you know, it's not even something she remembers. Would she do the same thing today? She would. But, you know, she would.
Yes.
But she never tried to get me to stay home and be in the family business, whatever my family's business is. So maybe I'm kind of conflating that. Like, I'm supposed to believe this woman is a terrible person because she walked in and said, I hate your hair, when I'm like, oh, please, that happens to all of us. So maybe that little bit of, it was almost like humor.
Oh, I love it.
But you're supposed to think, look at this terrible woman. She's picking on Ezri's hair. It's like, come on.
Yeah, it's like they needed more time to flesh this character out.
Yeah.
And what the negative sides were.
Yes, I'm not saying like we needed to see physical abuse or anything like that.
Yeah.
Look, emotional abuse is real. I completely get that. But just telling someone you don't like their hair, that's not enough.
She said she didn't like my hair and ruined my entire childhood.
Oh, she ruined my life. Anyway, I guess we're just supposed to see that as I feel like I'm going to get emails about this. I get it. Okay, we're supposed to see that as just an example of her being constantly critical. That's why I said maybe I'm confusing this with my own experience with my own mother. It was just a completely harmless comment.
Yeah.
Okay. My last point is it makes no sense that Jadzia's Amazon order would go to Ezri and not to Worf.
Right, I'm with you.
It makes no sense. Okay.
At that point, I'd be worried about what else is coming through.
Yeah, totally.
She can bring that up on her podcast.
We have to figure out what her podcast is.
I have a suggested name for it.
Yeah, what's your suggestion?
Ezri Dax's Common Sense Podcast.
Oh, I was going to suggest it was just called Who Am I?
Oh, okay, that one might be a better one.
Because, like, she's a counselor, and you could sort of connect that all into counseling techniques and explorations into yourself.
Okay, I'll accept that is a better one, yeah.
All right. Well, let me go to Women in the Future. The character of the mother was, to me, a total bust. The performance was fine, but she didn't have enough material to work with.
Yeah.
Imagine if over a few episodes they had built up the complexities of this character and how she made sacrifices and bad decisions to protect her business. Or at least if they had somehow showed us her being smothering and controlling and forceful. Instead, she just was kind of insulting and a little bit rude. You know, she interrupted Norval one time. I mean, it just wasn't enough. So the character was just not a good depiction, I guess.
Well, yeah, and you could also build it up of her working from this principle of all I'm ever doing is protecting my children.
Yeah, even if she had said that once, that I think would have made a difference in that character. And then my last point in Women in the Future, I think, is going to surprise you.
Yes.
Because I like this idea that Bilby's wife, who was painted by Bilby as, you know, this perfect, happy family woman, I like that she was just, I want my fair share. I mean, we never see her, but I feel like she might have been an interesting character, maybe more interesting than the mother.
I see your point, yes. She could be almost a mobster in her own right.
Yeah, exactly. Or she could be, like I always picture Sally on Peanuts saying, all I want is my fair share. All I want is what I have coming to me in the Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I am giving this a solid neutral. And I think it fully deserves that because there's nothing terrible and there's nothing great.
Yeah.
And it just coasts in there as, it's okay. It's an episode. I don't feel like I was let down watching it, and I don't feel like this is uplifting and I really want to go and watch it again. Everybody did a good job in it. I did like Ezri a lot.
No, she's good in it, yeah.
But other than that, in some ways it feels like an episode of like Dynasty or Dallas.
Yeah, you kept saying that. You thought this was the Falcon Crest episode. I didn't think it was quite soapy enough, but yeah, I see what you mean.
So, solidly neutral.
Yeah, it wasn't great. But it wasn't the worst thing we've seen on this show, for sure.
No.
The acting wasn't bad, right? The performances were fine.
Yeah.
But the depth of the story just wasn't there. So I think I'll agree with you and just go neutral. It's not really terrible or offensive, but it's not really worth watching again. We've seen it. Yeah. We can just move on.
Part of it, I think, might be to blame with Futurama because I just kept on thinking of Mom.
And I just kept thinking of my mom. This was a messed up episode for the both of us.
Your mom is a lot nicer than Mom in Futurama.
And the mom in this episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My mom's quite unlikely to interrupt you at dinner if you're trying to tell a story. And what else did she do? Those two things. And if you want to take a vacation, she'd let you take one.
Oh, yeah. She understands vacations. Yeah.
She might ask if she could come along.
Oh, right.
We did take her on a trip once.
Yeah.
Okay, that wraps up Season 7, Episode 11. Come back next week for Episode 12. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, like many people who have been emailing us lately. I think because we're in season 7, suddenly everybody's like, oh, I got to send an email. But we have gotten so many emails lately.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to submit. We've had some really great, really long, really in-depth over-analysis emails.
Yes.
Lots of headcanon. It's been great. Thank you for everyone who's done that. We appreciate them. We try and respond to every point that people bring up.
We do, but it is time-consuming, so forgive me if it takes a while. But yes, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at ReBingeIT. We're also on Instagram and YouTube at ReBingeIT. And you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. And you can go on TalkThroughMedia.com to listen to the other podcasts in the network as well.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.